Hello everyone, this is Mike and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be going over our continued series here on HTML reporting. So this will be HTML reporting with PowerShell part 3. And in this one, we're going to be looking at cascading style sheet classes and IDs. So as I kind of closed with the previous video the other day or yesterday, basically these allow me to differentiate between different HTML elements that I have in my report that I'm making. Okay, so let me switch over to my VM here. And this is where we left off with our user report script yesterday. And as I had mentioned here, we had created a bunch of HTML fragments. So we could see here we've got, fragment 1, frag 2, frag 3, and each of those is their own PowerShell pipeline that produces output. And then I combine them in this last convert to HTML line where I combine the fragments together to be the body of my report. I add a header in, and I was adding a link to a cascading style sheet. Right? And that we then write out to the HTML report based on the file. Right? Now, with that, if we apply the cascading style sheet, we can make the report look, I don't want to say make it look nice, make it look more fancy, make it look more professional. Okay, so this is where we left off. And so if I want to go ahead and run that, it was user report. The user in question was our Jeff Kent user, and the cascading style sheet was in the same directory. So I'll just do the dot backslash, and then it was css1.css. So I go ahead, oh, and I didn't give it a file name, my bad. So the ultimate HTML file, let's just call it report1.htm. Okay, so if I go look in this directory here, we should have a report 1, and we don't. Where did that go? Oh, I see what I did. So let's do dot backslash. Need to give it a full path. There we go. Okay, so now we go and there's report 1, and we open it up, and we can see the report that we had generated yesterday. All right, so that's using an external cascading style sheet. Now, one of the things I do want to show here is if I right click on the report in your browser and I do view page source, and again, I'm using Edge. You might view the page source other ways in other browsers, but if I pull the page source open, look at how the style sheet is drawn into here. Okay, so you could see in the header section, we could see, like, there's the header section right there. There's the closing of the head right there, and then we could see the title, and then this right here is the style sheet information. Right? And notice it doesn't put the text of the style sheet into there. It literally puts a link to where to go get it, right? So this is looking in my C: stuff, css1.css. So if you notice when I hover over it, look down in the bottom corner here as I hover over, and you can see it puts the path up. Now, the problem with doing a style sheet like this is what happens if this file is now not available? So maybe you keep your style sheets in a particular directory, maybe they're on a file server, whatever. And if something happens to them, all the reports that use them are now no longer good. They're not going to use that style sheet. So for instance here, if I take CSS1 and I just rename it, let's maybe call it CSS1-old, so it has a different file name. Notice if I pull up my report, I don't get the style sheet. So the style sheet's not embedded in the report file that you generate. It's not embedded in the HTML document. When you use this technique here of CSS URI. Okay, so basically if that file always has to be there when the report is opened. Okay? So if you wanted to make sure that the style sheet always applies to the document, you have to embed it in the HTML document. It's just the way that it works. Okay, so while this technique, a lot of people like it because you could always use different style sheets, the report, when the report is opened, the style sheet has to be available wherever the report is opened. So in my case, what I had here when I opened up the report, the style sheet's not available, right? So imagine if, again, in the page source here, imagine if I were to email this report to someone, okay, and it's looking for a style sheet that's on the C:stuff folder, and if that folder and that file doesn't exist on whatever computer is opening the report, that's going to be a problem. Okay, so the style sheet's not going to apply. Okay, so while the CSS URI kind of looks nice, that is the potential downside to it. So as I had mentioned in the last video, you could also embed the style sheet in a header section if you wanted to. So you can make something called a here string. So in fact, that's probably the technique I'm going to use with this script moving forward for the rest of the video here. So basically, I'm going to take this CSS file here. I'm going to remove that parameter, and I'm going to remove the link right here. All right. So that way we're not utilizing that. And then what I'm gonna do is the style sheet that I'm ultimately gonna create now for some of the class and ID stuff I'm gonna show you in a minute here. We're gonna call that through a variable. So $CSS equals, and then we'll put the here string into there because that will then allow us to be able to call this. Okay, so we could start the here string with our at quote and then close it with quote and then at. And then everything inside of there is going to be the style sheet. Okay, so and then we'll drop that into the header section down here like so. And that would now make the style sheet embedded into the report. So that report could then be copied wherever, emailed wherever, distributed however you like, and the style sheet follows the report wherever it goes. All right. Now the downside of that though is obviously the style sheet is embedded into the HTML report file. So in essence, it goes everywhere you want to go. So if you wanted to run this script to generate the same report maybe with different style sheets, this technique would be not as good. All right. So anyway, um, so let's first of all talk about the first topic of the video here, which was applying something different to one of the tables versus the others. Okay, now we have two techniques to go about doing this. We have classes and we have IDs, as I mentioned in the beginning here. Now, the way that it works is IDs allow me to do something unique. So for each ID that you declare, you can only apply that to one element in your report. Okay, so IDs are like, think of it like someone's social security number. It's a very unique type of label. A class, on the other hand, is something you could apply to multiple elements that you want to do the same thing to. Okay, so if I had a bunch of tables and I wanted to apply some formatting to them, I could apply the same class name to each table. So an ID is unique. Classes, you can use the same class multiple times. All right. So for the first thing that I had wanted to do in my report here, in fact, let's go back, not to there. Let's go back to my desktop. And let me collapse a few things here and bring something to the foreground. Okay. So this was the style sheet and the report that I was playing with yesterday here. So this was on the w3schools.com site. And again, I got to this just by going into kind of the start page for CSS. So you went home and then you clicked the try it yourself button, and that brings up this editor. And then I pasted my HTML report before the style sheet. So this is where I developed my style sheet. And so I pasted it before the style sheet so you can see all of the information that's there. All right. So now if you look at what was applied in the style sheet, we did a table header, we did table display, we did table rows where we're doing a different color to all the even rows. So all of these things here are applying to all of the tables. And I have 3 tables here that I'm using. Right? So what I'd like to do is I would like to take this table right here, which has the user info in it, and I would like to do something different to that. All right, so now how do I go about performing that? So the first thing here is we need something to identify this table here as different. So I'm going to use an ID for that. Okay, so basically in the HTML body here, here's the opening and the closing element for this first table. So what I want to do is in the opening element name here where you see table, inside of the angle brackets, I want to put an ID in there. So I just put in ID equals, and I give this table some type of name. So maybe I'll just call it table 1, okay, something like that. So I put this ID in there. You don't have to put spaces here. I just kind of like to do that because it looks a little fancier. And you could do single quote, double quote, doesn't matter. I usually just prefer to do a single quote for this. Right? So I put that in there, and now that assigns an ID to this table. And what I can then do is in the style sheet part here, I could reference that ID by doing a pound sign or hashtag, whatever you want to call that. I'm my late 40s here, so for me that's a pound sign. For you younger folks, that's probably a hashtag. Okay, so I do that and I put the name of the ID. In this case, it was table 1. And then I have a section that I can put information into. Okay, so for instance, if I wanted to change the color of the text, color, and then maybe we'll make the text blue. All right, so I go ahead and I and run it, and nothing happens. Okay, so this is sometimes some of the frustrating parts of cascading style sheets. Notice the ID, I did a capital T on table. And then when I did the corresponding cascading style sheet entry, I did a lowercase t. So if I change that to uppercase and run it, and notice it now applied. See how the text became blue. All right. Now, maybe you want to do blue, maybe you don't. So kind of all depends here. Let's say I'll just leave it as that. Okay. So let's say we want to do that. Now, let's say I also want to do some other table manipulation here. Okay, so if I kind of look at the table stuff that I was applying to all of the tables, was there maybe something that I wanted to do specifically just to table 1? Okay, so maybe I will put a bigger margin on it. How about the margin on the bottom? So I'll do a semicolon. And again, I could list these out each on their own line, right? So there was table 1 and then the opening curly bracket. I could do a carriage return, tab it in, put the closing down there, you know. So make it arrange kind of nice there. Okay, and then we had color blue, and then maybe we'll put another thing in here where we'll do margin the bottom, and maybe that'll be 50 pixels. All right, run it, and notice now there was a little more of a gap there. All right, so again, just to put something there. Now the next things that I would like to do to that table is I'd like to start undoing some of the stuff that was in here. Like I don't really like the center alignment. Okay, so I might want to take and do something different for that. Okay, so notice here we had, where was it? Where was it? In table display for all of the tables, we had a text align center. Okay, so what I would like to do is I would like to make something different for that. So for table one, I will do my own table display section, right? And then I'll put in that text align, and instead of center, I'll align it back to its default, which was left. And then notice that now realigns table one, so everything is left justified. Right? So that might be something, again, just to make that table look different. Okay, and another thing is maybe I don't like the striping on the colors here. Okay, so maybe I just want it all to be whatever the background color was. Okay, so remember I added that in a table row, this entry right here, and so I could very easily make another kind of like version of this that's being applied just to the table one ID, okay, and table row and column even, and then maybe in this, maybe in this we just set the background color back to whatever the overall background color was for the whole table, which was this this lighter shade of gray, so all E's. So I'll just go put that back, and notice now I don't have the striping, right, of the table. So you could do that, right? Now, let's see. So now this doesn't have to do with IDs here, but it's also something that you could make the tables look a little cool here. And I probably should have shown this yesterday. But let's say first of all, let's kind of isolate that table one part alone there. And I wanted to go add, let's say let's go back up to the table row section here. And I wanted to add another function to table rows, and I was going to add a hover. Right? And so with hover, this is basically what happens when the mouse moves over a table row. And so maybe I'll do background color. And again, I mean, you're welcome to do whatever you like here. I'm just trying to show a few different things here. Oop, totally spelled that wrong. Background color yellow. So let's run that. And notice now whenever I hover over a row, I could see that I am getting this hover effect where it's turning the background color to yellow. Right? Now, let's say I want the table one, to have its own hover. Okay, so I could bring that line. Let's put that over here. Add table one. Oops, forgot to close that one. There we go. All right, so we'll add that in, and then maybe on table one we'll do an orange just to be different. All right, so we'll run that, and then now notice as I hover over table one, I get an orange, and if I hover over tables, let's say two and three, though they're not really labeled like that, but let's say these other two tables, I can see we get the yellow effect. All right. So that represents the different, let's say, elements that I might want to specifically do to table one that I did not do to all of the other tables, if you will. So that allows me to differentiate. So if I wanted these tables to be different, I could do, this could be ID equals table 2, ID equals table 3, something like that. All right. Now, the problem, not really a problem, but something you got to think about. I hand added this table 1 entry into the HTML code. Okay, so we need that though to be in the HTML code when the script ultimately is produced, right? So when I run my script that produces the HTML document, I need this line of text to be in there. Okay, so that represents a bit of a challenge, if you will, in how you're going to achieve that. So that's going to take a little bit of little PowerShell manipulation, if you will. So if I change back over to my VM here, let's bring that back up. I need this fragment here because that's where I want table 1 to be. I need that line in there. Okay, so what I can do for that is add in a little work to fragment 1. Okay, so for instance here, if we looked at the HTML code, so we let's say we open up report 1 again, do the view source, and we look at, this is the fragment for table 1, right? That first table. So what I need to do is I need to work that fragment where probably the easiest thing to do is use the replace operator. So where I see table, I want to replace with table ID equals blah, 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 right? So I want to add something in there. So how, again, do I go about doing that? Basically what you could do is just recast this variable. So this whole thing runs and puts its result in frag1. So that's the HTML fragment. So before I continue on with the script, I can take frag1, not grag1, frag1, and recast it uh, using that replace. And what were we looking to replace? So we were looking to replace the table element like so with table ID equals table 1, right? And then, oops, table 1 closing element. Okay, now I'm going to use single quotes there. I should have, because that's what I want in the table, right? And then finally we'll close that up with the quote. Guys, so if it finds this text string, it's going to replace it with this text string. And in this fragment, there's only one text string that starts with that. All right, so that'll replace fragment 1. All right. Now let me go back and snag the style sheet from the emulator here real quick. So I'm just copying that. I'm not going to bother to show it on the screen here. So just going and grabbing the stuff that I've added in thus far. And back into here, just going to go put that into the here string. Right? And keep in mind, as I had mentioned, when you add the style sheet into a here string, you have to put the opening style element and the closing style element as well. All right. So those two pieces, this opening style and this closing style, they do not go in the file, like if you were using the CSS URI earlier. Okay. So now that that's there, let me just collapse it. So it's I can look at the body of the script a little easier here. And basically there's everything. So this was user report 1. So let's go ahead and save this. And let's see, 3 problems, missing expression after line 4. I might have an error in here somewhere, but I'll tell you what, let's just go with it. All right, so let's just go with it. Okay, so the style sheet, I don't have that parameter anymore. So let's try, and then we'll call this, instead of report 1, let's call this report 2. Okay, oh, and yeah, HTML file. Okay, so let's see. What the problem was there. Okay, what was that error again? String. Oh, I see what it was. All right, so this was, I removed a parameter, but I still have a hanging comma there. Um, so that's what it didn't like. Okay, so let's save that. Now let's go run this again. And okay, did an error. Report 2, open it up, and our style sheet is intact because it's now embedded in. So there's the hover over, it's left justified, it's blue text instead of the black. And then if I hover over these, I've got yellow, and away we go. All right, cool. So that allowed me to apply my changes to just table 1, and then I added the hover effect for yellow to all of the other tables. All right, so that's cool. Now, let's say we want to get a little more detailed with this. Okay, and again, this rabbit hole might not be for everyone here, but I want to do something for classes. Okay, so what I want to kind of do here is maybe we'll add a little bit onto this report here. Let's add another table onto here. And in that table, let's say I'm going to do some output of the user's home directory. So this user has a home directory that's stored up on my domain controller on DC1. So if I go to DC1 /home / jkent. This is that user's home directory, and I just have kind of a smattering of files that I've dumped in here from my personal computer. Some RDP files, some images, some PDFs, some JPEGs, a JSON template, the Windows hide updates utility. So there's a few things in here. So what I would like to do is maybe in this report, you want to see like the biggest files that are in the user's home directory to see maybe like how much data the user's stashing. And then we'll do something with classes based on the age of the files. So maybe files that are newer, so files that are less than a year old versus files that are older than a year, something like that. Okay, so first of all, we need to get that information into our report here. All right. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to need to grab that information from Active Directory, right? So if I do something like get 80 user identity jkent and not partition property star, if I look at all of the properties, the path for the home directory is in a property called home directory, believe it or not. So that's where that path is. And that is set in the Active Directory user account. So in 80 users and computers, you open up the user, you go to the profile tab, and there's the home directory property there. Okay, so you could also pick the drive letter that it gets mapped as. So I happen to pick M drive for whatever reason. So I need to query that particular path, right? Okay, so obviously I'm logged in as an admin, and that admin can query this path. Okay, so I'm not necessarily worried about that part, but maybe some of you might be. All right. So what I'll do here in the script is I need the user properties kind of in their own variable. So probably before I do the first fragment here, I think I'm going to take this piece right here, and I'm going to put that into its own variable. So maybe I'll call this dollar user query equals, and then I got that, right? So then the result of that is stored in here, and then with frag one, I'll just call that variable user query, right? So now I can reference this other ways as well. Okay, so this first one here. Oh, and finally, let me go fix that one right there. I've been looking at this typo for like 2 videos now, and I never got around to changing it or fixing it. So that's why the report looked kind of a little weird. Um, okay, where it had apartment, right? And it just had some type of like, made up value there. So now that should actually match what we're expecting. So that was just totally a typo on my part. That's been carried over for 3 videos now. All right, so we have the user info there. And now I can also utilize that info to go grab file stuff. So let's go do something like get content. And again, where are we getting content from? That path. So get content, that would be the equivalent of doing a dir, right? So get content, I'm sorry, get child item. Get child item. And where do we want to get stuff from? Let's say the path here. And then we could use that user query uh, variable and then call the, what was it? I totally don't remember. Home directory. There we go. And call home directory. Okay, so we could get that from there. Right, and then I wanted, so first all we need to sort. So let's do a sort object. And we want to sort on the length property, and I want the biggest ones at the top, so that should be descending. All right. And then maybe we'll do select object and grab like the first 10. And the properties, I want name, length, and how about last write time? So that'll be your last modified date. Okay, so let's go ahead and let me do a carriage return there to bring that down to the next line. Okay, so I'm not storing this in a variable, right? Not yet. The reason why is because I just want to have it output to my PowerShell session just to make sure it's grabbing correctly. Okay, so let's go run the script and it'll do the, oops, that's not the script. Let's go run the script, and the parts that are not stored in the variable, they should output to the screen. Okay, so let's go do that, and name, length, last writ, and it looks like those are the biggest ones. All right, cool. So now I want to add a property onto here. Okay, and that's the one that I'm going to selectively color using class. And basically, I want to add a property that's going to be labeled as maybe old if the file is more than a year old and new if the file is less than a year old. All right. So normally, you might say, hey, well, this is newer, this is older. It's easier to do this to static values. So hence why I'm making another property that has a static value, because each of these are all unique values. So it's tough to assign a class to that. Okay, so I can't just say like, hey, this file and like these files are older than a year. Let's make them a different class. Well, it doesn't work that way because these are all unique values in their own right. Okay, so that's why I'm adding a property onto here. Right, so that way we can have this work. All right, so this is going to get a little complex in the PowerShell here. So the first thing I need to do is I need the date from a year ago, okay? And I need to put that in a variable. So I could do $date equals, and I'll run the get date commandlet, which produces the current date and time, and then I'll use the add. Um, come on, add. Maybe add years. There we go. All right. It wasn't tab completing for whatever reason. All right. So add years and we'll do -1. So that'll put the year to a year ago. So if you're not quite sure how that works, I'll just take that and run that in the console here, and you can see, there's the year a year ago. So I'm actually recording this video and we'll be posting it on November 14th. Okay. So, and it's not 7:52, it's actually 10:52 where I'm at. These VMs, I just leave them at Pacific time because that's what they default to, and I'm on the East Coast of the US. All right, so let's see. So that's when that time is happening. So cool. So that gives me the date a year ago. And the reason why I had to put get date into parentheses here is so I could call the method on the object returned from get date. So commandlets don't have methods. The objects they produce for output have the methods on them. So inside you have the commandlet, and then outside the parentheses is the actual object that's produced as the result. So hence the dot, and then the ability to call the method, and then the argument for it. Okay. So now inside of select object, I want to make um, a calculated property. Okay, and inside that calculated property, I'm going to have an if else comparison, an if else construct that is adding something in based on that write time. Right? So let's go ahead and do that. So we have select object, and we already have it picking 3 properties to start with. Let me capitalize L to make that fancier. And then we want to make another one. So for calculated property, I do a hash table. And then inside of the hash table, we're going to give our property a name. So let's do like n equals, we'll call it maybe age. And then semicolon, and then e equals, or expression equals, and then I've got a script block there. Okay, and then in the script block, you're going to want to put whatever the thing is here. So let's start with if. So if, and then your comparison for an if goes into parentheses. So let's say the current object's last write time, if that's greater than $date, what do I want to do? So I have a script block, and then we'll just cast new into there, and then let's see. So outside of that script block, we'll do an else, and then that'll have its own script block, and then we'll cast old, like so. All right. So, and there we go. All right, so let's see if that works and see if I got that right. All right, so let's go run the script again. And cool deal. So we have a new property added onto the data. And if it's less than a year old, it got the property of new. And if it's more than a year, it got the property of old. All right, cool. So now that table looks good, and I want to incorporate it into the rest of my report here. Okay, so what I'll do is let's first of all put the calculator property on its own line. So after that comma, let's do a carriage return. And then we're done with the select. So what I could do here is pipe, and then we want to write this out as a fragment. right? So that means on get child item, I should probably save this. Let's do frag4 equals. So we're grabbing that. And then again, like I said, we'll convert to HTML fragment as table, and then out string for that. All right. So that gets that piece in. Now, what I need to do with this table here is what we're going to do is where we see this, let me first of all go ahead. Let me run this. So let me save this. And we're not quite done with it yet, but I just want to run it so I get an HTML file. Okay, so let's do report to. Okay, and if we open that up, so there's the beginning part. The style sheet's still applying. That's good. And oop, I'm not seeing that in there yet. I didn't see that. What did I do wrong? Oh, I didn't add the fragment into the body. All right, so I created that frag4, but I never called it. There we go. Okay, so that should be better. Sorry about that. Let's go run this again. Let's go look at report to. And oop, there's our new table. Cool. So we got name, length, last write, and age. All right. And in fact, I'm not liking the size of these tables. I don't like them at 100%. I apologize. I'm going to go back into the style sheet and change that. So where was that? Width, I want like, let's do like an 80% table. Save that, collapse the style sheet. Let's run this again and go look at report to. Okay, that looks better. Okay, so let's see. So there's our table here with the biggest files and the properties new, old, old, new, new, old, new, old. Okay. So if I look at the source, what I want to do is I want to insert some classes into here. Okay, so here's ultimately that table, right? And we need to add, see where it says TD new and slash TD. So I want to take that, and if it's new, I want to add a class in there. All right, and then if it's old, I want to add a different class in there. So the news get one class and the olds get a different class. Okay, and what it's going to look like is we're going to do this part right here, new, where you have the opening TD. It's going to be the angle bracket TD space class equals something, and then the closing final angle bracket in the opening element. And then you don't touch the closing element, but anyway, but that's what we need to manipulate. Okay, so how do I go about doing that? Again, I can use kind of like in fragment one where I did this this replace operator. I can kind of do the same thing, except we're not going to be going after the table itself. We're going to be going after the table display. Okay, so that table's being generated here. So it's in frag4. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to put in a couple lines there. So we're going to take, let's just gap these here, $frag4 equals $frag4 with a replace. So what we're looking for is that angle bracket TD, angle bracket old, and then angle bracket closing TD, and then angle bracket. So that's what we're looking for. That's what was in there. And then what do we want to replace it with? So let's just kind of copy this line right here. Okay, and then what we want to replace it with is the class. So in the opening TD element, we put class equals, and then what do I want to call the class? Maybe I'll call it old file, okay, something like that. Okay, and we also want to do the whole thing here to when the class is new. So if the value is new, we want to replace the class with new file. Okay, so if the value is old, we're applying a class of old file to it. Just that particular table display. So think of that as like your table entry. And then if the entry is new, we're applying a class of new file to that. All right, so that's what I want to do. So let's go ahead and save that. And then I want to rerun the script to generate the report. And then I want to look at the report. And then we're going to do the view source. And I want to look to see if that worked. And it looks like it did. So there's table display, class equals new file, still has the value of new, and then there's an old, class equals old file. All right, perfect. So that's exactly what we wanted to happen, right? So if we look at this, it doesn't affect the display though. See how the actual table display entries are still the same. So the class didn't do anything to how the table is displayed. Right? Oh, I should also have fixed this this postscript here. This now is not the last table where I put the postscript on the end of there. The post content. I should probably fix that at some point. But anyway, all right. So um, okay. So now to incorporate this into the style sheet, what we're going to do is again the style sheet for me now is embedded in the script. Right? So let's go find the style sheet. Let's expand that out. And we want to add on to the style sheet. So the next couple things we're going to do to the style sheet is we want to call that class. So we do that by using a dot and then the name of the class, which was old file. And then what do I want to do with that? So in this case, maybe I'll just change the color to, how about red? Okay, and again, pay attention to the case because the classes are case sensitive as well. So remember where I made the class, it was capital OLD, capital FILE. So that's the name of the class. So, and the class is applied at the table display area. So it's in the table display element. Okay, just like where I did the ID up here, right, where I added ID, that was added to the table element. Okay, so in this case where I just did the name of the ID and then did some stuff to it, that's assumed that it's at the table section. So here, this class is assigned at the table display area, so I don't have to tell it that. So hence why I'm just doing an open bracket and I'm putting in a CSS property there. So likewise, I could also do one for new file, and then let's maybe do the color green. All right, let's just do that. Okay, so that's changing the style sheet. So now run the script again. Oops, run the script again. And we should see our report. And if I go look, notice they're colored now. So new is green, old is red. All right. So we've kind of done that for the different rows. All right. Now, one last thing, and this has nothing to do with classes or IDs. It's just kind of making it look nice. Again, it's probably something I should have mentioned in the previous video, but for whatever reason I forgot to, so you'll have to excuse me for that. Um, is making the let's do something a little interesting with the header there. All right. So let's say, for instance, I want to make the header look a little better. All right. Now I know that's kind of vague. You know, make the header look better. What the heck are you talking about? Um, so instead of doing, well, two things I want to do. All right. First one here, let me close the report. First one here is I want to make um, the table header be a little bigger. Like I changed the height of the rows, but I never changed the height of the header to kind of match, right? Or even be bigger, in all honesty. Okay, so let me go ahead and do that just to fix that. So height, maybe we'll make it 30 rather than 20. And then on the background color, instead of doing a straight background color, what I'd like to do is do something I think looks a little cooler, which is just specify background. And then for background, what you do for a property here, let me put this in here, is you do linear gradient. And then you put what you want the start color to be. So maybe we'll do like start with a blue and then transition to a dark blue. So you've got a gradient there. And again, don't forget your semicolon because you have other values behind it. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Save. I'll go ahead and run the script, hopefully for the final time. Look at the result. And okay, so the bigger header looks nice, I think. And the gradient, you've got blue to dark blue. You can kind of see it there, which looks kind of cool as well. Right? And again, if you want the gradient to stand out more, you could again use more different colors. So if I want to do a light blue to a dark blue, I rerun it, and you know this might look a little cooler. Right? So there's light blue going over to dark blue. Right? So that is the final product here, kicking out our HTML report. And so we've added IDs and classes in here. We added a gradient. We added some hover. Um, we added some color coding. We created our own property using calculator properties. So we did quite a lot to the script here. And again, in this approach right here that I went with, I'm embedding the style sheet into the report, right? So now if I look at the page source on the report, um, if you notice here, look at the header section, and so we have the style sheet, you know, in there. Right? So that means if I email this report to somebody, if I copy it somewhere, if I open it up on a different computer, the style sheet is following everywhere where the report file goes because it's literally in the HTML code. So again, that was different technique than we had ended on yesterday, where we're using the CSS URI path. Okay. So with that, I'll have this completed script up on my site. If you want to download it from there, that'll be up there. Again, I'm always looking for likes and subscribes to help the growth of my channel. So if it doesn't cost you anything, so if you could, I'd definitely appreciate a like and a subscribe if you enjoy the content and want to see more of it. And with that, any questions, throw them down in the comments, and we'll see you in the next video, everybody. So thanks for hanging out in my three-part series here on HTML reporting.